sharing something very important with you because it's really this simple. When we were all born, a trespass occurs, okay? And you say, well, what's that trespass, Chris? Well, when you're only moments old, lying as a baby in a hospital, and your parents are filling out hospital records and documentation, they're under the impression that they are putting on the record just for, lawful purposes and on the record that you have come into this world and that, this is who their parents are, etc. But what is actually happening and behind the scenes is something very nefarious. There's documentation that when you're, like I said, you're only moments old, your name is being put to pen to paper, but then there's all this other documentation that's occurring outside of your consciousness, outside of your awareness. And when you talk about law, if you are not aware of something, if you've not been fully disclosed, if there's never been a meeting of the minds of people, and again, you're an infant, I mean, you don't have this capacity yet. So you can't enter into any contracts. Everybody understands that. Nobody could show up at your door that you've never seen before, put a piece of paper in front of you, and if they've got your name on it, all of a sudden you're somehow bound to that paperwork unless you were cognizant of it, that you had this interaction with these people and that your wet signature is on it and that you were fully disclosed at what the paperwork was meaning. So when we're born, a trespass occurs, and this trespass is absolutely horrific because what it's doing is when we come into this world, we can talk about law now. I'll give you first one of the two most important things my fellow man doesn't know and needs to understand. The word legal. Legal does not apply to a man or woman. And people go, what? What do you mean legal doesn't apply to a man or woman? Well, that's because legal only applies to that which is incorporated, a corporation, okay? Or something that was created, it's a fiction. Lawful applies to a man or woman and people, not persons. Person is a trick word that's used within the legal society. We're not born as persons when we come into this world. And if you actually look in the Bible at Job 34:20, I believe it is, it says, let no persons be placed upon yourself, right? That God's telling you, don't allow anyone else to cloak you in any type of other person, because a person separates you from the Creator's creation, which is a man or a woman. So at this moment when we're born, this documentation is being created, and all of us receive shortly after we're born what? A birth certificate. And everybody believes that that birth certificate is actually a correct documentation that represents them as the man or the woman. And the first truth that you learn is that it is not. You had nothing to do with its creation, and the people that created it, they were also ignorant of it as well, because the system, as you've probably eloquently talked about in the past, has been around for thousands of years of how they've enslaved mankind through the corruption of his consciousness. And this whole birth certificate, this was just a new level of the system that got rolled out worldwide in 1934 here in Canada, pretty much around 33 to between 35 around the world. That's when they started rolling out these birth certificates. And what this does is that when you're born, this evil that's in this world right now, because we're talking about the I don't know if I want to say the word, but the big lie that's out there with the C word that's going on, that all this fear is stoking, all of this is occurring because people don't understand simply who they are. And they say, well, how do these two things tie together, Chris? Well, when you come into this world and that trespass occurs, what it is it's the same entity that's created this massive lie surrounding the COVID stuff that's going on and all this fear that's going on. The same people that are creating that, which is the central bankers, the Queen, and the Pope, that's where all the heads ultimately go to in this hierarchy within this system we are born into. Okay, we're born into like a casino, a corrupt criminal world. Like it's a crime scene, this entire world, when you're born into it. And you don't realize, and most people, as you eloquently said, don't even have a clue what is really going on because our trust has been misplaced for so long. So on that trespass, when it occurs, what is actually happening is that there's a legal person that's being created on paper, okay? A legal person. You're not born a person first and foremost, and you're definitely not born a legal person. We're all born free and equal under the law. We come into this world without any paper attached to us. Remember that. And even as we stand and sit here today, all of us, that same foundational truth still applies. There is no paper that applies to us unless we've entered into a contract with another man or woman or through an organization where there's been full consent and full, a meeting of the minds. You understand what you're engaging in here. But what has happened is that when you come into this world, because this evil is so despicable, is that it has to kill the man or the woman on paper and create a legal fiction, a person. And then they use that founding document, that birth certificate, to go and create other identifications, corporations that are created in your name, such as a driver's license, what's on your health card. You go look at, in Canada, we have a SIM, which is a social insurance number. All of these things relate to that corporation, that legal person, because in the legal world, words have multiple meanings, synonyms. So a person, if you go and look at it, also has the same rights, supposedly, as a corporation in the legal world. But when you understand that legal does not apply to a man or a woman, it only applies to that fiction that was created when you were born. And this is the massive deceit that's gone on with everybody, because when you've gone out, like I say, go and pull out your birth certificate, your driver's license, look at your bank account, your health card, whatever you have, you're going to see your name is written in all capital letters first and foremost. Secondly, then you're going to see that it is written in different configurations. Sometimes the last name's first, sometimes they might only put an initial for the middle name, sometimes they might reverse it, put it in the normal way, your first, last, and middle. At the end of the day, you did not create that birth certificate. And this is what people must understand, okay? That birth certificate was meant to trespass against the mind of man right from the moment that we come in. And this is why our world is so lost, because we don't consciously know who we are. So people would say, well, how does this apply to us, Chris, and moving forward? If, for example, right now we have an enormous lie that's ruling this world, and that's what we must address first. The common law is a secondary part of this, but what ties directly into that at the same time is you must know who you are, because once you know who you are from this trespass that happened at birth, then you can understand what's going on in this world and who has jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is an important word, which means control, right? Who has control over us in this world? And no man or woman has control over another man or woman. Okay, we are not property of another man or woman, and no man or woman can administrate property without right. Those words are incredibly powerful when you understand what that is actually meaning to you as you walk this world today. Because the problem that we've had with this trespass that occurs, it's really a three-part punch. First is a trespass when we're born. And what happens at that trespass? Well, there's an unlawful conversion. What does that mean, unlawful conversion, Chris? Well, that means they're taking you from a lawful capacity to outside of a lawful capacity, which is illegal. They're not taking you, but that's what's being shown and created on paper, is they're creating this legal person. That's that all capital name. So when you have your birth certificate, go home, or if you're at home, pull it out and take a look at it. There's two things you need to really remember on it. Number one, you didn't create it, so it has nothing to do with you. Remember that. The second thing is that look at the information that is on it. You're going to see a birth date, which lines up with the day you were born in hospital, but there's a second date that's very important, and that's the registration date. So what was being registered on that day? As you do the research and you learn, if you go to my website, awarriorcalls.com, there's 4 short foundational videos that you can watch that explains all of this simply. And what's happening is that they're creating a company, a corporation, right? What you have to learn is, another word you have to learn is service corporation. Take the word government out whenever you're speaking to these governments that are supposedly creating all these things around us, and insert the word service corporation, because that's what they are. They're all incorporated, and they're a service corporation, no different than McDonald's or Burger King. So if Burger King sent you that ID when you were born, you would say, oh, isn't that cute? Isn't that funny? They sent me a birth certificate a few weeks after I've been born, and you wouldn't think anything of it. But unfortunately, because it came from this service corporation, the government or the state, wherever country you live in, from that organization, that collective in which you believed and been led to believe that that is your government. They're there to protect and serve you, and that they're there to, they're not there to rule over you. And yet this is what is occurring, because the service corporation created that entity on paper and they claim it as their ownership. So when you walk into these public courthouses, this is why it's simple to understand, is that all of our public courthouses have been corrupted. They're all operating on massive constructive fraud. And you say, well, what's the constructive fraud, Chris? Well, everybody knows that lawyers operate in our public courthouses. That's a key word, public courthouse. It's a public courthouse, not a private courthouse, which means every man and woman has the right to access it. And there's no man or woman in that courthouse that has the right to deny you access to seek the administration of justice. It's very important when you draw down the center of lines, and this applies to everybody. The simplicity of this common law is common sense. This conversation we're having here right now, this is one that should have happened with your parents to you and your grandparents to them and so forth. But unfortunately, these simple truths have been hidden from us. So that's why I say to people that once you understand who you are, you understand this trespass has occurred, then you're going to understand what's been going on in our courthouses. These people that work for a society called the bar, well, that's a private society, and they don't represent you in a court, they represent you. And the people go, well, wait a minute. First, you're telling me the legal world doesn't apply to me, yet we see all our fellow men and women going into these public courthouses under legal processes and court proceedings. So that's right. So how are they doing that? Well, the lawyer is not representing you, he's representing you. And then people go, well, what is he representing you as? See how simple this is? Now you go back to that birth certificate. He's representing you as that which was created when you were born in this world, the legal person, because their world, the legal world, only has jurisdiction over that which they've created, right? It's always about corporations in the legal world. So that's how they're dragging you in, and they trick you once you get into court to believing through their various different tactics that you are actually representing, that you're surety responsible for this entity that they created unbeknownst to you, but your consciousness has been thinking all along, oh my goodness, that is me. In Canada here, we have on the back of the majority of birth certificates, which they've started to change now, they brought out a new batch of them that are a page long instead of wallet size. There was a number on all the backs of the birth certificates that were given to people. And it's a red number, and it's a CUSIP number, CUSIP. And when you look that
don't
up,
they
right,
give that to prisoners as well?
well, I don't know. They may. They probably do, because again, it's not the prisoner that's in jail there when you understand the paperwork. It's that corporation. Like, that's when you
True.
realize how horrific this is, because there's so many people that are locked up in jail who have caused no wrong or harm to another man or woman, right? They may have been there, sure, they've got a drug charge or something, but guess what? That's their property. Unless they've caused wrong or harm against another man or woman, then they have no business being brought into these court systems. And again, it's all under the color of this law, this deception, this deceit that happens. And lawyers aren't taught this either, but lawyers are learning it. The black robe ones, Ramella, they know it at the highest levels in the court system. They know exactly what's going on.
Right.
You're damn right. And people need to know that,
You're
number
totally
one, they're
right.
not your friend. And number two, they have no jurisdiction over you, control. Once you enter that courthouse in the correct capacity as the man or woman, and your paperwork gives notice ahead of time before you walk into that courtroom to the man acting as crown attorney, because they're all operating under a very disturbing presumption. And that presumption is that you're under their jurisdiction control based on this unlawful conversion that's happened to us when they've created this documentation. Anybody can go look at any legal filing, and you're always going to see that the parties' names at the top are always in all capital letters. Okay? You do not, this is common sense now. You don't need to be a lawyer to understand this. Were you taught to write your name in all capital letters? No, we don't do that. Right? So why is our name in all capital letters at the very heading of every court filing that's going in there? Well, that's because it's corporations doing battle in a courthouse. See, and you don't know that. And that lawyer can represent you as the corporation that he's trained within their legal system and society to be able to work within their court system. But that entire system is all based on fraud. They're ultimately there to extract as much money out of you as they can, both lawyers on each side. Those lawyers have an oath to the court that supersedes their clients. Even if you're going to use, remember, it's a service